Reading to you from my autobiography entitled I Count My Life by Sabbaths, affectionately known as America's premier toilet reading book, Part 2, My Childhood, Chapter 14, Piano Lessons. My story wouldn't be complete without talking about a man who played a somewhat significant role throughout my life, Theodore Black. Ted, as we called him, was my piano teacher. My mother had me take piano lessons when I was 5 years old, about the same time I began first grade. I was excused from Sister Miller's class to go for a 30-minute lesson. Ted used the Thompson series, and I recall him using a neat little device with a dial and pulley that moved a musical note up and down the lines and spaces of the clefs. Every good boy does fine, treble clef. Good boys do fine always, bass clef. F-A-C-E, or face for the spaces of the treble clef. I believe I made it through the third of the series of books, but practicing was not my cup of tea. Mom tried to make me practice, but it just didn't work out. She finally gave up and was left to my sisters to become the musicians in the family. All three of them are accomplished keyboardists, but in those days we didn't use that term. You were a piano player or an organist. I recall before we were able to afford an organ for our church that Dad bought a device called a solo box. This was an electronic device that sounded similar to an organ, but it was played one note at a time and situated beside the piano in church. The one thing about my experience with piano lessons is I have always loved the piano. I learned to read notes, which helped me with voice lessons that I took in seminary, and I'm drawn to symphonies at the Hilbert Circle Theater that feature piano artists. I taught myself to play songs that interested me on the piano. Later, during my teen years, I purchased sheet music produced by Roger Williams and learned to play them. Born Free, Autumn Leaves, The Impossible Dream, Guantanamera, and two gospel songs, How Rich I Am and The Lord's Prayer. I've composed some personal tunes that have no name, nor are reduced to written form, but all of which are for my personal pleasure. In times of stress, I still try to get away from everyone and play the piano, going through my little repertoire. It seems to bring me peace and solace. Sometimes people will stumble in on me playing and think I'm quite accomplished, but I'm not. When people show up, I start making mistakes because I'm so self-conscious. Chapter 15, Days with Dad. With 3 children born so close together, Mom had her hands full, so it was during the summers my father would occasionally take me with him on his rounds. These were not pleasant memories on the whole, because going with Dad usually meant sitting in a hot car, they didn't have air conditioning in those days, waiting and waiting and waiting. I don't know why anyone didn't think to bring along puzzles, books, games, coloring books, or anything else to distract this little boy. In modern times, my father would have been arrested for neglect of a dependent, but those days were different. My father, in my view, lacked any kind of awareness of what my needs were or precautions he should take. I'm sure he loved me in his own way, but I'm sure he was trying to keep me from being a headache to my mother. As an adult, I've had an unusual capacity to hold my urine, and I've always said it was due to those days with my dad. I would sit and sit and sit and have to go, but I didn't have anywhere to go. I dare not wet my pants or soil the car seats for fear of a beating, and I didn't dare get out of the car. So I did my best to hold it until it finally dawned on Dad to have a restroom break. I've told my wife that I developed what is known as an expandabladder. Now at my age, that's a thing of the past. One pleasant memory was of eating at a diner. The diner my father took me to was near a factory he was soliciting for a sale. I'll never forget the sandwich I got. It was a piece of sausage like a brat. The guy sliced it in two, put it on an egg bun with mayonnaise. It was delicious. That was the exception rather than the rule. Most of the time, Dad would flag down a milkman, buy a quart of buttermilk, and share it with me. No boy loves buttermilk. It's sour, and to this day, I can't stand it. My dad always liked diners for some reason. I don't know if it was from living in New York or his upbringing as a child. When Pepe's Grill came to Indianapolis, they had a surefire customer in my dad. I don't recall going to Pepe's Grill, though. There was another string of barbecue places that popped up in Indianapolis for which my father mourned when they went out of business. I think they were the only business for about 2 years, and one of the most unusual buildings is still located at 4376 Madison Avenue. It's an A-frame with a striped roof, much like the colors of Stuckey's. The franchise was named Sadie's Barbecue. I never got there either, but I recall my dad talking about it because we drove right through that intersection every time we went to Greenwood. In those days, there was an interurban, a rail system that ran through Greenwood connecting Indianapolis and Louisville. Chapter 16. Oh, no. The one question from my childhood that seems to me to be the most frequently asked was, "Who do you think you are?" It seemed to me to always be asked in a harsh, attacking manner. I don't ever recall my mother asking me that question, just my dad. I have tried to figure out why he asked it so often, but he almost always did when, for whatever reason, he was upset with me. I don't recall how early it started, but I soon learned that the best and safest answer was, "Don't know." "Don't" is a guttural contraction for "I don't." In other words, who do you think you are? "Don't know." I don't recall when or how I learned that it was the safest answer, but it was the only answer that could help de-escalate a situation. As I got a little older, perhaps in my pre-teens, I got a little cheeky about it. And once, when my father demanded to know who I thought I was, I replied, "Well, you named me Stephen Andrew Schmidt." I got his backhand so hard it made my head nearly spin as he shouted, "Don't you talk back to me!" I think most kids find themselves in this kind of lose-lose situation where no matter what the response, there's no positive outcome. After the sassy response, I reverted back to the familiar grunt, "I don't know." I have thought about that matter quite often in the ensuing years, and I determined that I would never ask that question of my children. For me, it became a very dehumanizing, belittling attack aimed at the heart of my feeling of self-worth and self-esteem. To be brutally honest, I often wondered who my father thought he was, and my conclusion is that he suffered self-esteem issues as well. Please tune in for the next chapter.